All right. Hello, hello, hello. Good evening, class. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to class. You are all welcome to another wonderful session. Today is day 7, and I hope you are doing well. Good evening, Leon. Good evening to you all. Good evening, Tijani. Great to see you. Great to hear from you. Good evening, all of you. Frida, good evening. Good evening, and welcome to another session. Good evening, Priscilla. Welcome. All right. So today we want to move on to another concept in Python programming. And as we are learning Python, we are building our skills for the real tech careers. For you to succeed in tech, you need to have tangible skills. You need to have real skills, skills that you truly understand, skills that you can apply without doing lookup, without using AI, skills that belong to you. And that is what we want to achieve. And Python is an incredible skill, a very, very important skill for you to have. And so we want to add to our knowledge. We've been learning, we've been building upon the program. And if you have missed anything, please go back and watch the videos, rewatch them, and you will understand them. Try and solve the challenge we give, the questions, the exercise we give, try and solve them, and you will be able to get it. All right. Yesterday, we studied about manipulating strings, and we want to do a quick recap on what we studied. A very quick recap. So I'm going to take you through some of the slides quickly. And if possible, I'm going to ask someone to tell us what you learned from yesterday's class. All right. So yesterday we talked about using quotes to enclose your strings, and Python recognizes your quotes to set your string variables. And so you are able to use double quotes or single quotes. And we learned yesterday that any of them that you use is okay. You can choose to use any of them. However, there are certain situations that one may be more appropriate than the other. For example, the movie title here, it will be best to enclose this in double quotes, because if you use single quotes, the middle quote is going to interfere with it and it will create an error, because Python interpreter will think that you are ending your quote. And so if you use double quotes in this situation, you avoid the error. We also learned yesterday that you can still use the single quotes and use escape characters to escape the error, and it is going to work. The second example here, you have to use single quotes because we have two double quotes in the middle. Whether it's single double quotes or two double quotes, using a single quote to enclose the entire string will prevent errors, because once you begin with a single quote, Python will be expecting another single quote to end the string. And so even if you have double quotes in between, it is not going to affect your string. We also learned about creating multi-line strings with triple single quotes and triple double quotes. You can choose any of them and it will still work. Multi-line strings allow you to write long messages that span across multiple lines. So you can use that to write a whole message in your Python program. We also looked at manipulating strings by concatenating, and the concatenating or the concatenation operator is the plus operator. This is what we use to concatenate strings. When it comes to integers, you can also use the same operator to perform addition, but when it comes to strings, we use it to combine or concatenate. The technical term is to concatenate, and concatenate means you combine. And so you can have one string and another string, and you can just concatenate them. If you want to include a space, then you have to manually create a space as another string and also concatenate. We also learned about repeating strings. And to repeat a string, you use the repeat operator here to repeat your string. When you are working with integers, you can use this to multiply. This is what we use for multiplication when it comes to integers. But when it comes to strings, we use it to repeat strings. So whatever you type, let's say hello, you can use a repeat operator and how many times you want to repeat, and it is going to repeat it for you. We also looked at the wonderful concept of indexing, and indexing is a concept that you will carry through your data analysis. You'll carry through a whole lot of tasks in Python, and it helps a lot if you understand how to create or how to use the index positions. And we learned yesterday that strings are indexed, meaning each character has a unique position starting from 0. It is very important to know that it starts from 0 so that you don't use 1 for the first character. The first character is 0. So for example, if you have a wonderful name like Benedine, you can extract the first letter by using 0 in square brackets. When you say square brackets, it means you are retrieving the index, and it's going to work. It is going to work. After today's class, we are going to be given a simple group exercise where we'll be doing things like this. Pick a sentence and extract certain specific characters from the sentence. So this is how to create the index. We also looked at using -1 to target the last character. So it doesn't matter how long it is. It doesn't matter how long the it doesn't matter how long the string is. You can use -1 to target the very last. You don't have to say 20 or you don't have to say 15. It doesn't matter how long it is. Once you say -1, it is going to start from the reverse and give you the last character. We also moved on to the concept of slicing. And slicing is another powerful concept that you carry along. All right, carry along in data analysis, in data science. We are going to carry this along. And this concept allows you to create a substring by extracting a portion of your string. And to do that, you still use a concept of indexing. If you have Python, it's fun, and you want to extract Python, you look at the index position of P and the index position of the N. Then you add +1. The +1 is very important because we learned that when it comes to slicing, Python excludes the last index. And so if you know that you want to end at N, you need to do +1 before you get it. So if you look at this particular string, N is supposed to be index 5, but if we use 5, we are not going to get an N because the last index will be excluded. This is just a rule in Python. It is just a rule, and you don't have to question it. That is how it works. It is just a law when it comes to slicing. We also looked at some wonderful slices, and my favorite one was the reverse slide, and we're able to reverse some slides. We're able to reverse some names, and you saw how wonderful they looked. All right. We also went ahead to talk about the immutability of strings. So this is very, very important. Almost any Python examination that you write, you are going to meet this question that is a string mutable, and you have to remember whether it is mutable or not. You're also going to be asked whether lists in Python are mutable, talking about data structures. Are lists mutable? Then you have to know whether it is mutable or not. How about sets? Are sets mutable? Are tuples mutable? These are questions that you are going to encounter when it comes to Python examination. You have to know them, you have to respect them. And so if you know that strings are immutable, it helps so that you don't write a program that tries to mutate or change a string because strings are immutable. not mutable. Now, this means that you cannot change their value. When you create a string and it has a value like hello, this hello becomes an object in the computer's memory, and this hello cannot be changed. You can reassign the string to a different, you can reassign the variable to a different string that will work, but that does not mean that you have changed the object that was created in memory. Because if you try to edit, for example, this code here says that you should target the index 0, which should be h, and assign it to y. If you do this, this is very powerful because this is actually targeting the object and going within the object to edit, change the h to y. Python will raise an error and tell you that object assignment is not allowed, or you are not allowed to assign to this particular object because it cannot be changed. However, you can reassign it to a different word. Once you assign it to a different word, like world, this will work. And again, it does not mean you have edited the H. This is not how Python works. When you assign it to a different word, it is just a new object that the pointer has been pointed to. If you look at variables, we have variables that can hold data by itself. This means that when you reassign it, you have actually edited the data. It's also possible in computer programming. However, we have some variables that are just reference variables. They are just pointers. They are reference variables. We call them pointers. This means when you create a new string, you can point it to it and it will work. That does not mean you have edited the first object because that object is stored in memory as well. All right. So to move on, I want to encourage you and let you know that without pain, there is no gain. No pain, no gain. For you to succeed, you will go through pain. For you to succeed, you go through years of hard work. You go through years of learning. You go through a long process of working hard, doing a whole lot of work before you will get there. That is how it is. All the amazing engineers, all the amazing people you know, they didn't just get there. They were not born with computers in their brains. Maybe they were, but you too, you were born with computers in your brain. But they didn't become what they are just by luck. They didn't become what they are just by luck. What they did was that they studied. They studied. They studied hard. They studied. And through consistent studies, daily studies, they were able to, they were transformed into what they are today. All right. So for you to succeed in tech, you need to do your best to keep on learning, develop the habit of consistent learning, daily learning. And what will happen is that you are going to morph into a new version of you that understands, that is in tune with modern technology, that is able to think, to create modern technology and think like the way technology expects you to think, for you to solve problems and do credible things in the world of tech. So what I want to tell you is that you need to put in effort. It's not going to come just like that. There was a time that I wondered how some people are so intelligent, super intelligent. Some people are doing wonderful things. They are creating mobile devices. They are creating amazing electronic devices, creating amazing machines. People are creating ChatGPT. People are creating Gemini, and people are creating programming languages. And how did they become what they are? And I did a research, and my finding was that they went through the same process rigorously. The only thing is that when you are going through the pain, nobody sees it. When you are doing the hard work, nobody knows it. But through consistent work, through hard work, You will get there. You will get there. You will get there. It doesn't matter. You will get there. So embrace the pain, go through the hard work, and you will succeed. Today you learn, and tomorrow you earn. Learn today and tomorrow. The time has come to learn. All right. So we want to move on and look at another important concept in Python about the print function. The print function, understanding the print function, formatting options, and writing comments in Python. And to do that, I'm going to introduce a new file extension in Python and a new tool in Python that you can use to create different kinds of, or to do different types of work using Python. We've already talked about .py, and we said .py is a file extension of Python scripts. So if you want to create a Python script, you use .py, and your code is stored in the file called .py, and the Python interpreter runs your code from top to bottom and interprets your code. Now, it is not only .py that is used to create Python or to write Python. Python can be written in so many different environments for different purposes. Remember, several careers are using Python, and several Python is used in several industries. And so once you understand the language, you can implement it in different environments. And one simple environment is the IDLE. So as a Python student, you need to know about the IDLE. It's a very, very basic environment, and it's mostly designed for students. And so please type IDLE in the chat for me. And IDLE stands for Integrated Development and Learning Environment. So IDLE is a learning environment, and it is an integrated development environment. It is also an IDE. So most of the time we use IDE to write code. So if you want to write code, you can use an IDE, which is a tool and a whole development environment for you to write code in your preferred language, whether in Java or in C++ or in Python. You need an IDE. The best and the most compatible IDE for Python is PyCharm. PyCharm is a leading IDE for writing Python. Matter of fact, it was created just for Python. And so it is very, very popular when it comes to Python. VS Code is also there. VS Code is general purpose. You can use VS Code for your HTML, for your Java, for your Python, for C++, for any programming language that you want to write in. And so we have what we call IDE. And this IDE refers to your development environment where you don't just write your code, but that system is designed to be able to analyze your code, to be able to allow you to debug your code, to be able to discover errors in your code, to be able to um, give you options when you are typing. Sometimes you type little and it's able to autocomplete for you. So it is a development environment written to or created to help you write code easily. You know, when it comes to writing the code itself, you can just use a text editor. We use text editors to write code, but an IDE is a special environment that supports the language and helps the developer to write code easily. Now, this ideally is not just an IDE, although it is an IDE for Python. It is a learning environment, and it comes bundled with Python installation. So once you install Python, you should have your IDLE with you. And it's a very, very simple program. let me open to it. Let me open to it and let's see. So once you launch your Python, you should have your ideally, or once you install Python, you should have your ideally. So once you type ideally here, it's a very simple tool, and it is a shell program that allows you to create interactive, write interactive Python scripts line by line. So if there's any Python code you want to test, you don't have to open to PyCharm, which is heavy. You don't have to open to VS Code, which is heavy. Of course, VS Code is light, but still heavy compared to ideally. If you want to test simple Python script, you can use the ideally to test it. So it allows you to write your Python code and it will execute it line by line. So with this one, we don't use it to write a whole script in a file. We use it to write Python code line by line. So let's take it that way. Yes. So usually when we refer to a Python script, we are talking about Python code written and stored in a file, like a .py. Yes. So with this, we use it to test Python code line by line. It is a multi-window text editor. The text editor, a little intelligent, designed for Python. It does syntax highlighting to make code more readable. It does auto completion, code suggestion to help with coding productivity. It has a debugger to support coding debugging in Python, and it is easy to access. Easy to access, of course, and it provides easy access to Python's documentation, and it is particularly useful for beginners learning Python as it provides an easy to use interface and immediate feedback through the interactive shell. However, many experienced developers also use ideally for its simplicity and convenience. So you are going to use it, and as a Python student, you should just hear about it. Just hearing about it is important. It allows you to write Python code. So it loads is a shell that allows you to communicate directly with a Python interpreter. So any Python code you write is going to work. Let me create a variable here called um, num1 equals to 5. And let's say num2 equals to 7. And let's say print num1 plus num2. So this is Python. You can write simple Python code and it will work for you. So we need to test simple things. All right. Apart from this, you can also access your Python from your terminal. If Python is installed, just open to your terminal where last time we went and we said Python dash dash version. The moment you type Python here, you are actually calling the Python interpreter. And so the Python interpreter will run whatever handle you put here or flag you put here, and it will execute it. So when I type Python dash dash version, I'm going to see it work. Because when I type Python, I'm telling Python to process something. And so you can also use this to run a Python script. If you have a Python script saved, you can say Python, then the name of the script. If it is called chatbot.py, you type it, and then Python will go and launch the script for you. So you can launch your Python this way. I don't have any script over there. If I want to move to where it is, I need to move to it. So you can see the path to this particular location. That is not where I have stored my Python project. I think if I have a Python project, it should be on drive D, and it should be in a directory called projects, and it should be in another directory called Py. And let's see if I have a directory called chatbot. I do. If I didn't, I would have gotten an error. So if I type Python I'm inside the chatbot. If I type Python chatbots.py, I'm able to load the Python program. So over here, you can see that a program has been loaded, and I launched it because it is a Python script, and I use this Python to launch it. All right. So when you type Python, you are actually activating the Python interpreter. Let me say that in simple terms. You are activating the Python interpreter, and you can use it to launch a Python script, or just to run a simple Python instruction. Apart from that, when you type Python like this, you are also going to launch the Python interpreter right in your terminal. So the same thing that was launched in the IDLE. So what I entered to launch in the IDLE, I have also done the same over here. So over here, I can write Python code and it's going to work. If I type hello world, it is going to work. I'm also able to write Python code in my terminal because I have launched Python. Over here, if I say num1 equals to 5, num2 equals to 7, and I write an expression num1 is greater than num2, what am I going to get? True or false? True or false? So this is an expression, and this is a Boolean expression, and so we get false. So you can just write your Python code line by line over here, and this also works. Sometimes we say this to get you introduced to it. So when the time comes for you to use it, then you know how to use it. All right. Now I'll come back to the terminal, and to get to the terminal, I'm going to mention something very powerful. And to talk about that powerful thing, I'm going to start by talking to you about Jupyter Lab. Please type Jupyter Lab in the chat for me. Please type Jupyter Lab in the chat for me. Please type Jupyter Lab in the chat for me. So let me see Jupyter Lab. All right. So I've seen Jupyter Lab. Thank you very much. And I like the way you are writing it the same way you are saying it. I think you guys are so wonderful. And you are writing it the way you are saying it. Yeah. So this is how the brand is. This is how it looks. And so if you want to write it, you need to write it the way that the brand expects you to write it. All right. Now, this Jupyter Lab is an interactive development environment. So previously I mentioned IDE, and I mentioned that an IDE is a special coding environment that has been designed to support the programming language. If you want to write code, you actually need just a text editor. With a text editor, your code can be read, your code can be compiled, your code can be interpreted, your code can be translated. But sometimes we have special environments to make coding much more easy. So we have PyCharm, we have VS Code, we have Sublime Text, we have so many IDEs. Now, this Jupyter Lab is a super special IDE because this is the tool that chief data scientists use to create machine learning and AI model. This is a program that chief data analysts use to analyze data in Python, and using Python, and to do visualization, and to analyze complex data to help process the data to draw conclusions for the business or companies to understand how or to get insights from their data. So it's a very special tool, and it allows you to work with what is called Jupyter Notebook. Jupyter Notebooks. So please type Jupyter Notebooks as well. And this notebook, type that as well for me, and we'll talk about it. So Jupyter Lab is a special lab or a special tool, and it allows you to work with Jupyter Notebooks. So this means we have something called Jupyter Notebooks, and these Jupyter Notebooks are amazing on their own. And when you come to Jupyter Lab, you are able to have multiple Jupyter Notebooks within one environment. And to explain this further, we will talk more about notebooks, because in your Jupyter Lab, you are actually working with Jupyter Notebooks. So you can create several tabs of Jupyter Notebooks and work with them. And a Jupyter Notebook is actually, okay, we'll read that. But this one says that enables you to work with Jupyter Notebooks, code and data all within a single interface, right? It provides a flexible and powerful environment for data science, scientific computing, and general purpose programming. It supports multiple programming languages, so not only Python. Mostly it is used to write code, to write Python code, but it supports several other programming languages as well. Now, a Jupyter Notebook is a special notebook that you can use in place of your Microsoft Word or your note software to create special notebooks. Now, this is a notebook that allows you to not just write text, but also write code. Not just write code, but also run code. Not just run code, but also do live, allows you to perform live operations in terms of calculations within the notebook. And I'm going to explain that. So Jupyter Notebooks are a popular format for creating and sharing documents. So it's just like a document creator, like a Microsoft Word, but this is something else. This is something else. It can allow you to write code. Now, Microsoft Word is a text editor, and it's a rich text editor. It allows you to write anything and format it anyhow. But then you cannot write code within your Microsoft Word. If you want to write code, you may write the text of the code, but not the real code. And you cannot run the code in Microsoft Word. Maybe after running it somewhere, you can paste it, or unless you are using the VBA tool, and the VBA can have some object that can allow you to double click to go and write code. But this is different. So watch this. With this, you can create live code within the notebook, write the code, run the code, get the result of the code right within the notebook. Apart from code, you can also generate visualizations like special charts, special visuals from data within the same notebook. You can write text, you can insert images, you can insert videos, and it is a complete notebook that can allow you to input any kind of data, whether structured or unstructured, and it can contain the whole data and allow you to use this to work on projects that needs all the resources in one place. Because of that, data analysts work with this tool because you can import raw data, you can do your analysis with Python, and you can fetch different parts of the data and display it within the same notebook. You can create visualizations from the data, like charts from the data, and display it within the same notebook. You can insert images to support your reporting. If you are reporting from your data, you can insert or embed videos and anything that you want. So this has become a super powerful tool that is used in scientific computing and in data science and data analytics. So it allows you to write and execute code in what we call cells. So we have cells, and the cells you can choose to write text in your cell, or you can choose to write code yourself. And it makes it easy to experiment with code and do so many things. And to further explain it, let me just show you a short clip about it. Let's look at this short clip and then we will continue with our discussion. So let me share my screen again. And this time I'm going to play a short video. Let's watch it, very short, and it will explain what Jupyter notebooks are. And this Jupyter notebook, we are going to be using it within Jupyter Lab, which is a super powerful modding tool to make you use your Jupyter notebooks with ease. So this is a short video. Let's watch it and we will continue.
Welcome! In this video, we'll introduce you to Jupyter Notebooks. Jupyter Notebooks are like documents where you can execute chunks of programming code, one chunk at a time. You can do everything from creating interactive maps to creating interesting data visualizations and even embedding videos. Jupyter Notebooks are open source and was designed for interactive data science and scientific computing. Data scientists use Jupyter Notebooks because in data science, you are often exploring your data or building models, and needing to see the outputs of parts of your code quite frequently, which Jupyter Notebooks enables. Jupyter Notebooks were also designed to be shared with others. You can tell stories in Jupyter Notebooks with your data by combining your code with explanatory text, output from your code, images, and videos.
All right, so if I have code to share with someone, it will not be okay or best to use Microsoft Word to share my code. I can come to my notebook, my Jupyter notebook, create a wonderful heading like this. I can create a subheading, then write this code with explanation. And you can see that the explanation I can write can be detached from the video. So look at all of this text. I can write any text I want, but where I want to insert code, I can also come there and insert code, explain the code. Not just explain the code can be executed and the code can display its result right in the document. And so when it comes to data analysis, we analyze data bit by bit, different portions of the data with Python code, and we can display the results over there. So we can explore the data and explain the data from the beginning to the end by writing simple Python code and displaying the results and continue writing. And when we are done, the beautiful thing is that we can share the notebook. When you share the notebook goes with the code, the feedback, everything, and it can be used to read and understand what the data says. All right. Let me share my screen again. All right. So over here, we can see our Jupyter notebook. And we've seen this particular video. And the next thing we want to look at that make notebooks possible is what we call IPython. IPython. So please type IPython in the chat for me. IPython. IPython. Now, IPython is an enhanced Python shell that is called interactive Python. So all that Python does, we have another version of Python that we call IPython. And IPython offers special features over the standard Python that runs on your system. It provides more and efficient workflow for Python programmers, particularly for interactive computing, for data analysis, and for scientific computing. Compared to the standard Python shell, IPython fosters a smoother development experience with advanced functionalities such as tab completion, object introspection, and a system or system shell integration. All right. So what I'm trying to introduce to you is another important tool that you need to know, because when you want to use Python, especially for data science, AI, data analysis, most of the time you work in an IPython environment. However, you still write the same Python code. The same Python code we write in the IPython environment. But the IPython environment is a different environment that is interactive and allows you to write your Python code in a way that you can analyze data bit by bit. With IPython, we do not usually write a Python script and store it in a .py file that the Python interpreter will execute. We usually write Python in an interactive way by sending Python code to perform an action and receiving the result right there and there. And so when it comes to IPython environments, we store our files as notebooks. So over here in the bottom right corner of my screen, you are going to see .ipynb. The .ipynb stands for Interactive Python Notebook. So we've already talked about Jupyter Notebooks, and we've talked about Interactive Python just now. And so you are going to discover that we have some files that are IPynb or Interactive Python Notebook. And in such environment, we write Python using notebooks, especially Jupyter Notebooks. Now, if you go to your terminal again, and you don't have IPython installed, you can install it by typing pip install IPython. Just as you have to install libraries, you also have to install IPython before you can use it. If you already have it, you may see that requirements already satisfied. When you see requirements already satisfied, it means you already have it installed. If you do not have it installed, then you are going to have to install it. Now, when I type IPynb, sorry, IPython, when I type IPython, I'm going to launch a different kind of Python shell. This Python shell I'm launching is very, very different from the first one I launched. Over here, you can see lines and you can see line 1. And in line 1, I can write code on line 1, whatever I want to do. Let me just try print and say hello world. And it will execute it. Then it goes to line 2. Now, this is how we use Python to write code in notebooks. We write the code line by line and we send instructions line by line. So if there's any analysis or anything I want to do, I write it in the cell and the cells are in the lines and it will be executed and display the results right under it. This is how the notebooks work. This is how the notebooks work. Now, IPython also serves as the foundational or the foundation for Jupyter projects, for the Jupyter project. So Jupyter notebooks were born from IPython's legacy and provides a web interactive computing environment where users can create documents combining live code, visualizations, narrative text stored in IPy and B. This integration facilitates collaboration, reproducibility, and knowledge sharing, making Jupyter Notebooks a versatile tool for various domains, including data analysis, research, education, and beyond. And so when I go back to my terminal, I can comfortably launch Jupyter Notebook or Jupyter Lab. All right. So if I type Jupyter Lab like this in my terminal and I have Jupyter Lab installed, I'm able to launch Jupyter Lab in my browser. So this Jupyter Lab, this is what we use to do a lot of work, especially in data analysis and all that. And this is the Jupyter Lab we're talking about. I was able to launch it from the terminal. All you have to do is to type Jupyter space lab and you have it. If you want to install it, you use pip install Jupyter Lab without space and it will install. But if you already have it installed, you can just type Jupyter space lab like I did, and you'll be able to launch it. So when you launch Jupyter Lab, it will launch a server. Okay, so you are not seeing my screen. So sorry. Let me. All right. So this is a Jupyter Lab I was able to launch. Let me launch it again. Let me launch it again. All right. Sorry about that. Let me launch it again. All right. So I'm going to share my screen now. And I'm going to open to my terminal again. I'm going to close this to end the server. And I'm going to open to another tab here. You can install Jupyter Lab. And this Jupyter Lab, this is how we do it. Or this is how we write it, okay? And you are going to see requirements already satisfied. If you see requirements already satisfied, then you are like me who already has Jupyter Lab installed. If Jupyter Lab is already installed, all you have to do is to launch it using Jupyter, Paste, and Lab. Once you do this, it will launch the Jupyter server and run Jupyter Lab on your system. All right. So this is a Jupyter Lab, and this is where you begin your project from, whether data analysis or you want to create machine learning models. This is where you begin from. Now, over here, what do you see here? If you can see my screen now, what is written here? Let me see if you can see my screen. All right. So someone says, I see notebook. All right. So notebook here simply means you can launch a Jupyter notebook. And so if you click on this, this is going to launch a Jupyter notebook for you. And it is going to use the IPy kernel, and it is Python 3, like we've always been saying. Python 2 is discontinued, so now we use Python 3. And IPy kernel means it is going to launch your notebook with interactive Python or IPython. So this will not launch your notebook with Python because the notebooks are built on IPython, or they are built using the IPython environment, or they work in the IPython environment. Over here, you can also launch a console with IPython, an IPython console. Later on, we will see how that looks like. So this is similar to what I opened, and you can see the same code over here, and you can go ahead and type what I did over there. All right. So very, very similar to that. We are going to see how that also works. And over here, you are going to see this. And please, what do you see over here? My mouse is pointing at something here. What do you see here? All right. Okay, so to launch the Jupyter notebook or Jupyter Lab, all right, so the Jupyter Lab, you can simply do that by going to your terminal or your command prompt. Just type Jupyter Lab, just like this. That's all. So type Jupyter Space Lab and you'll be able to launch it. That's all. If it is not working, it means it is not installed. And to install it, this is how you install it. So to install it, this is how you install it. You type pip install Jupyter Lab as one word like this. To launch it, you type Jupyter first. You type Jupyter first and then lab, and it will launch. All right. So when I asked you to tell me what this is, you said it is a Python file. Now, a Python file is different from a Python notebook. Over here, you have a Python notebook, and this is what we use mostly for data analysis. And it is a Python notebook, and it runs not on the standard Python shell. It runs on a different Python shell we call IPython or interactive Python. But a Python file is a normal Python file, you know. In your Jupyter Lab, you can also run a Python file. And you can see the extension of a Python file. What do you see here? I know I have not titled it, so I see untitled. But what is the extension here? What is the extension here? The extension here, someone says it is .py. So .py tells you that this is a Python script or a Python file. So with this, you write your Python code from start to finish and you run it. You write Python code from start to finish and you run it. But if you are working with a Python notebook, you can see the extension. With a Python notebook, what do you see as the extension? I know it is untitled, but what is the extension? All right. So someone says the extension is dot first person Rachel IPyNB. So you can see that these are two different, or they run different Python shells, or they are interpreted by different Python shells. All right. So we have the .ipynb. It tells you that this is an interactive Python notebook, and .py is a simple Python file. So in your PyCharm, anytime you create a file .py, you are working with Python. Python script or a Python file. In your VS Code, I don't know if I have VS Code here. I think I have the installer. If you open to VS Code and even in PyCharm, let me see if I have PyCharm here. You are able to create not just a Python file. For example, when I right click on my project folder here, I can go to new, and this is where I create a Python file. So when you create a Python file, it is supposed to end in .py, and it becomes a Python script that can be executed. But then, because I'm using the community edition, we don't do Jupyter notebooks here. But then you can see right here that I can also do Jupyter notebooks in PyCharm. Probably in the other editions, you can do Jupyter notebooks here. For VS Code, you can also open to Jupyter notebooks in VS Code. And once you launch your VS Code and you create a Python notebook, you can see that the Python environment will be the interactive environment. The interactive environment is what you see when you go to environments like, sorry, the interactive environment is what you see when you go to your notebook environment like this. So over here, we have these things here. These boxes are called cells. You can use your cell to write code. You can see code here, or you can use your cell to write what is called a markdown. So a markdown, you can take markdown as a normal text, So if you select markdown, it means this cell will become a text box. If you select code, it means the cell becomes code. For example, when I came here, we saw markdown file here. You can also create a whole markdown file, and here you can also create a whole text file here. If you go to GitHub, you can see that you have your readme.md. It simply means it's a markdown file. All right, so it's like a special text file that has been written in a very special format that we will get into later on. So over here, if I say this should be a markdown, I can come here and write text. I can say, welcome to the Python Developer Bootcamp. Now, when I say this and I click here, you can see run this cell. When I run this cell, you can see that it is here as text. But if I come here and I type print hello world, you can see how it is written. It is written like this because this is code. If I change this to a markdown and I run it, it is going to be there as text. It's not going to be executed because it is not code. However, when I go back to it by double clicking and I tell my notebook that this is code, now it will treat it as code. When I run it, it's going to execute it and it's going to load it over here for me. If I want to have my text as normal text, I can just type it. Let me come here and create another cell on top. You can create a cell above and create a cell beneath. You can shift a cell down or move a cell up. Over here, let me come here and use hash and say Python developer bootcamp. Now it is displaying this way because it thinks I'm going to write code, but I can tell it that I want this to be a markdown. So it will change its behavior. And when I run this as markdown, you can see that it didn't appear as code. All right. It didn't appear as code. Sorry, let me use asterisk instead. So there are different symbols that you can use to format your markdown in different ways. All right. So you can see that the weight looks a little different from this one. This one, when you run it, it appears as normal text over here. Then here appears as code. So over here, you can write your code over here, whatever code you want to write, whatever um, you want to process, you can process over here, and it will display the results. If you are analyzing a portion of data, it will display the result right here, just like we saw in the video. Okay. So next, I'm going to move on to, let me check this first. All right, so let's just take a stretch break and then we'll continue from here. We have a little more to look at, then we work on a group project, a simple one. So we'll take like 10-minute break and we will continue. All right, so welcome back from the short break. And for the rest of the lesson today, we are going to be using Jupyter Lab and we are going to be exploring it a little bit. So we want to start today's lesson talking about comments in Python. It is very important to write comments in your Python program. Comments are simply notes you write in your code to explain the functionality of your code, either to yourself in future or to others reviewing your code. It is important to note that when it comes to writing code, you are not the only one who reads your code. And so whenever you are creating a program, it is recommended that you write comments in your code. So we have what we call single line comments. And single line comments are, let me share it well. Single line comments are simply comments that we write on a single line, and we use the hash symbol here to write the comment. So once you create a hash symbol, everything after it on the same line is treated as a comment. Whenever you write code in Python, comments are not interpreted in Python. Comments are ignored by the Python interpreter because they are seen as just notes. And it is good practice to write notes to explain what you want to do. This is a simple code, so this may not need a comment. However, when you write code that performs a specific operation, you can write a comment on top indicating what you want to do. All right. So in Jupyter environments, you can write comments. In PyCharm, you can write comments. In any Python development environment, you can write comments. All you need is to use the hash and you go ahead and write your comments. So let me open to the Jupyter environment we created. And over here, if I want to add a comment, I can just say hash and say printing hello world, printing hello world over here. And I can have my code under that. So what this means is that you are trying to explain the code you want to write over here. So you write a comment on top of the code using the hash symbol. Whatever operation you want to perform, you can write comments to explain the operation. For example, yesterday we wanted to write a program that reverses the name of someone. So you can begin by writing what you want to do, reversing a word or a string, reversing a string using, let's say, slicing. All right, so once we say this, it tells me what I'm about to do. And when someone is reading my code, it tells the person what I'm about to do. So I can just create a variable that will use an input function to receive the name. So enter your name enter your name. And once the name is entered, what I want to do is that I want to create a reverse version of the name. So this is just a variable, and I'm going to say name, and I'll create a slice using this. Once I do this, I have created a slice of the name. Now, I can go ahead and say if the name is equal to the reversed name, then print this name is a palindrome. Else print this name is not a palindrome. All right, so this is just a simple example. Depending on what you are working on, you can write some notes on top of it. And in Python, you need to understand that whenever you are performing any complex operation, you can include a note. And we are going to see comments that you can write on a line like this. This is called a single line comment. And so the whole line is a comment. We also have different types of comment that are called inline comments. So an inline comment can be written on the same line where a code or a line of code exists. So we have a line of code here. After that code, I can just explain what I am doing. So here, I can say using a reverse slice to reverse the name. All right, so what I'm doing here is that I'm trying to explain my code. Now, we are going to read that it is not okay to clutter your code with a lot of comments. However, comments should be used sparingly wherever necessary to explain your code in a way that when someone is reading your code, the person will be able to understand it. So I can press Shift Enter, or I can come here and click on Run, and then I'll be able to run this. So over here, if I type, let's say, Madam, it tells me that Madam is not a palindrome. It's supposed to be a palindrome, but it is because I wrote it with the first letter was an uppercase. So over here, just like we looked at yesterday, I can put dot lower here and also check this dot lower. And when I run again, Shift Enter, and I type Madam, it will tell me that Madam or the name is a palindrome. All right. So also, instead of saying this name is a palindrome, I can just come here and use F strings, and I can insert the name over here with the curly braces and just say name is a palindrome. So when we run it again and we type Madam, you can see that Madam is a palindrome. All right. So now I did this for you to see that in your Jupyter environment, you can still write your Python code here and it's going to work just as you do in your Jupyter lab or you do in your VS code, it's going to work. The only thing is that in this particular environment, mostly we only perform single tasks in individual cells. So it's not like you writing your entire program in one cell. If you want to write your entire program, then you need a Python file or a Python script instead of the interactive cell. Okay, so the idea here is to see how comments are written. Now, we have single line comments, like I mentioned. We also have what is called multi-line comments, and multi-line comments are enclosed within triple quotes, either triple single quote or triple double quotes. So sometimes you want to write a lot of text to explain your program or to explain your code. You can use multi-line comments, and with multi-line comments, all you need to do is to use triple quotes and then write your comments in between. You need to enclose it with triple as well. If not, you get an error. So this worked, and in between here, you can write your comments. So Python is going to ignore this, and everything within these quotes will be ignored by the Python interpreter because they are seen as comments. So anything you put in here will be seen as comments. This is a way to write comments. And it's very important to understand that we write comments this way because sometimes we need to write certain notes as comments within our program. Remember, this is not a multi-line string that we assign to a variable. This is just comments, and you can use this to explain long comments. And this will help us when we move to something we call docstrings. Now, docstrings are comments that we usually create within functions, and they are usually longer comments. And so to create a longer comment like this, you need to use multi-line comments to do that. All right. Before we get to docstring, we also have another type of comment that we can look at. We have the inline comment, I already mentioned it. And then we also have what is called commenting out your code. Again, when it comes to inline comments, you can write your comment on the same line where you have code on that line already. So after the code, you can go ahead and write an inline comment. Now, if you have code in your program that you want to disable and you don't want to delete, instead of deleting, you can place the hash in front of it and it becomes comment. So sometimes we have code that we'll be using later. We don't want to delete, and so we want to disable it and make it a comment. So everything I see here, if I put hashing before it, it is now seen as comment. So if I do this, I have disabled the code and it will not be executed anymore. So everything here is now seen as comment. Although I know it is code, I have intentionally disabled it by making them look like comments. Later on, if I need it, I will come back here and I will remove the comment and it will become code again. So this is also done in Python. Now, what we want to end the class with today is a print function. And the print function is designed in a special way. It's one of the most frequently used functions in Python, and we use it to output data on the screen. Anytime you use a print function, you are going to print something on the screen. And the print function allows you to pass arguments into the parentheses. And these arguments, if they are text, you need to enclose them in single or double quotes, and it will be treated as a string. If it's a variable, you don't have to introduce the quotes. You can just go ahead and type it. For example, if I say age is 20, age is a variable, and so I can just print age like that. But if I want to print, let's say hello world, I need to put it in quotes because it is text or it's a string. This is called a string literal. I'm printing a literal string within the print function. And I can also print a variable like we see with the age variable. Now, sometimes we have multiple items that we want to print, and the multiple items need what we call a separator. Now, to print, let's say, name, age, and city on one line, you need to use a separator. Now, Python allows you to use the comma as the separator. And so if you introduce comma here can allow you to add multiple arguments. Again, the print function, after you type your print, you need to put something within the parentheses. What we put within the parentheses, we call it an argument. And it's an argument because when you create a function, you need to input a parameter that will receive a value. The value of that parameter is referred to as an argument. And the print function always needs an argument to know what to print. And if you want to use multiple arguments, you need to use the separator, like we mentioned here. The comma here will serve as a separator. And so over here, you can see that I'm printing literal text name and then a variable name. The variable is not in quotes, but the literal text is in quotes. And so you are going to see name, colon, and then the variable will also be printed as well. Then over here, you are going to see age, literal text, and then you are going to see the age variable 30, then city, and then the city as well. Now, we are looking at this because the print function allows you to create separators and print multiple items on the same line because of how it was designed. Because of how it was designed. And so if I want to test this out, I can open to my notebook that I just created here. And I can just write name. Let me put Theodora like this. Then age equals to 30. And then city is Accra. And I can print name like this. And bring comma and then type name. Now, when I run this, I'm going to see name in literal text and then name. The last time we were able to concatenate strings by using the plus operator here. And if you use this, because they are both strings, it's going to work. This is a string. This is also a string variable. If you run this, it is going to work, but you are going to notice something different with the output. Let me change this separator back to comma, and let me see who can see what happened over there. So what difference do you see? You can see that with the first one, when we use a plus, you can see that there is no space between them. Thank you, Robley. And when we use comma, we can see that there is space. This is why the last time when we use a plus, we actually created our own space before printing, and we now got the space. Because the plus is not a separator for the print function. The plus is just used to concatenate multiple strings. So if I want to concatenate this with this one, I need to introduce my own space before it will work. If I want it like this, I'm not going to get a space because this is not a recommended separator for the print function. And so I can come here and create my own space before printing this, and it's going to print. However, if you use a comma, the comma is a separator for the print function. And so anytime you use a comma, the comma will actually introduce space. And over here, I'm getting double space because I created space here and I brought a comma again. When I run this, I'm seeing that the space is gone and the comma is what is creating the space now. If I change this to the plus again, the space is gone. If I change it to the comma, I get the space back. This is because when they were designing the print function, they actually created a separator parameter within it. If you are in an interactive Python environment, you can see the signature of any function by typing question mark in front of the function. Instead of the parentheses, you can just use a question mark. When I run this, I'm going to see that I'm going to get the whole signature of the print function. If I want to see the signature of the input function, I'll type input and I put question mark here. And when I run it, I'm going to see how the input function was created. The input function was created in a very, very simple way. And when it's time for us to create functions, we are also going to see how creating functions work. With the input function, we only have one parameter, and this parameter is set to nothing by default. And this has a meaning. When we get to creating functions, you are going to see how you can create function and choose to assign your parameter to a value or not. When we go back to the print function, we can see how intelligently the print function was created. The print function has a first parameter called args. It was not assigned to anything, but it has another parameter called sep, and this sep was assigned to space. This is why when you use the comma as a separator, you get this particular space. So by default, we use a comma to add multiple items, and it is a default separator. So when you type the comma, you can see that space is created for you. The print function also has another parameter here called end, and it is also assigned a value. Before we go into details, anytime you create a function, for example, when we create our own functions, we're also going to do the same thing. If you create a function and you create a parameter within the parentheses, after you create your function, if you don't assign the parameter to a value, it means that parameter is required. And it means without it, you cannot use the function. So it is required. When we get to functions, we will explore this again and you understand it. Now, the print function did not just require these arguments. Again, we have something called parameters, and the value of the parameter is referred to as an argument. If you have a parameter and you provide a value to it, the value is called an argument. So over here, the print function use args as its parameter, expecting the argument that you will provide. All right. So this is why when we call the print function, we are supposed to put something within it. We are supposed to put something within it because the print function expects arguments. When you create this star before an argument or before your parameter, it simply means that your function is intelligent enough to receive multiple arguments. Let me explain it in a simple way over here before we continue. In Python, if you want to create your own function, you start it with a keyword def. Yesterday, we used if to create conditional statements. This time, we are creating a function, so we use def. If you use def, it means you want to define a function. So let me call this my function like this. When I define my function, I give my function a name, and this is the name I give to my function. So I can call it my function, or I can call it anything. Then a function has parentheses here. And so once you create a function, you need to introduce a parenthesis. Now, you can tell your function not to receive any arguments, and your function will follow that and do what you said it should do. All right, so let's say this function works. This function works. All right, so what I have done here is to define a function. Now, in Python, a function, when you define it, it doesn't do anything until you call it. All right, so let me call my function and say my function. When I call my function, I'm going to see what the function does, and the function is telling me that this function works. This means that I was able to create a function, and the function does something. Whenever you create a function does something. We had an input function, and this input function, it does something. What it does is a code that is placed within it. We also have a print function. It does something. What it does is a code that was given to it for it to do something. All right. So if I create my function and I write code here that this function works, it is going to do what it's supposed to do. I can tell it to do anything by typing the code over here. I can say that it should print 1 plus 1 before printing this. So I can run it, and anytime you call my function, it will do what I said it should do. Again, a function does something. Whatever the function does or the function wants to do, or you want a function to do, you define it over here and it does it. Now, if you create a function, in Python and you place in a parameter, this is called a parameter. What this means is this. What this means is this. The function has been created, all right. It is here. The name is my second function. If I go and call my second function, it is not going to work. It is not going to work. Why? Because my second function was requesting for a parameter or an argument. And when you called it, you didn't provide the argument. You didn't provide the argument. So it is going to create an error and say that it is missing a required argument. It is missing a required argument. All right. When we get to function, we'll talk about all of this. And so I'm just trying to let you see how the print function was created. This means that when an argument is put within a function, anytime you call it, you have to provide it. All right, you have to provide it. Let me come here and put a comma here and say that it should print whatever you provide. Let me run this again. If you don't provide anything, you get an error again. But if you provide something, let's say Python, and you run it, you can see that this function works and it printed whatever you provided. Okay. Now, thinking about this, when the print function was created, there was an argument or a parameter. This is called a parameter. There was a parameter placed within it. There was a parameter placed within it. And so anytime you use a print function, you need to provide a parameter before that function will work. Now, if you look at the signature of the print function, if you look at the signature of the print function, you are going to see that when they created this particular parameter, they added an asterisk to it. The asterisk here is very intelligent, telling the parameter that it can accept multiple arguments. All right. If you have a variable and you assign a value to it, the value is called a value, and then we have the variable. If you have a parameter placed within the function when you are creating it, the value is called an argument. This is why you are going to hear argument and parameter used interchangeably. Okay, now over here, I actually requested that you should give me one argument. If I call my function and I provide two arguments, I provide two arguments, we are also going to get another error. This means that the function takes one positional argument, but two were given. So the Python pays close attention to the arguments you provide. So I asked for one, the function is asking for one, but I provided two. And so it is also getting an error. However, if I put the star here, the star here means that you should be able to take as many as you want. So this time, when I run it with two, it's not going to give me an error because it is now star. It doesn't matter the name you give to this. You can call it star ax or star anything. The moment the star is here, it means that you can take two arguments, three arguments, four arguments, five arguments, or more. This is why when we use a print function, we are able to add multiple arguments. I can print name like this. I can come here and tell Python to add age to it. To add age and print the age, I can tell Python to add a city and print the city. And when I run this, I'm going to get all of them on the same line. It is because when they were creating the print function, they used the star to receive the arguments. And so it means you can provide multiple arguments and it is going to work. Now, there are some arguments or there are some parameters that we assign them to values. Whenever you assign a parameter to a value, we call this a default parameter. A default parameter is also intelligent, and it means that you don't have to provide the arguments, but Python will provide its own arguments. Let me explain it this way. For example, when it comes to the input function, you realize that the parameter they use, they assigned it to a value of nothing. This means that if you call the input function and you don't provide any argument, it is going to get a default argument. And so any parameter that has a default value, we refer to it as a default parameter. A default parameter. We call it a default parameter. And what that means is that if you don't provide anything, it's going to work. So over here, let me go back to one argument. If I run this and I accept it, and I call my function without an argument, it is still going to give me an error because the function is asking for something, but you didn't provide it when you called it. But if you assign it to a default value, let's call this default value IPython. If I say that my function has a parameter but has a default value, it means that even if you don't provide anything, there is a default value to be used. And so when I run this, let me run this first and run this again. When I run this, okay, sorry, this is called ax and I have add here. When I run this and I run this again, you can see that it is going to work because it has a default value. All right, so the print function has some default parameters that Python uses when you don't provide them, but they still work. For example, we have a default parameter called sep. We have a default parameter called sep in the print function. This sep, you can choose to use it or you can ignore it. And we also have one called end. You can choose to use it or ignore it. What we have here, these are the arguments of what we want the print function to print. Let me come here and insert a cell here, and let's do something within this cell. Or better still, let me create a cell up here, and we do this over here. Now, if I say that print, and I say print name, comma, name, when I run this, it's going to print name Theodora, no problem. But then if I come here and I type sep and I say equal to, let's say, let me just put anything here like this. and I run it, it is going to print the SEP wherever the default space was. This is why whenever you use your comma, the default separator, which is space, is what is placed within your text, whatever you want to print. And if you don't call the SEP parameter, you can choose to call it or not call it. If you don't call it, what it means is that it will use the default value, just like I explained with my default parameter. So the default value, which is space, is what will be provided wherever you have space. But you can also control the SEP. And when you control the SEP, what it means is that whatever you place in here is what is going to be used as a default separator. If I come here and I say Python should go ahead and print the age, and I run this again, you can see that wherever the separator was supposed to appear, what I put here is what is appearing. If I don't provide a separator parameter or argument, and I run this, then it is going to use a default value, which is space. This means that sometimes when you are outputting from the print function, you can choose to control the separator by intentionally calling the separator parameter and then providing your own value here as argument. And whatever you provide is what is going to be used as the separator within your print function. All right. Also, we have another parameter which is called the end parameter, and it has a default value. And the default value is a new line character. Whenever you see this, it means a new line should be printed. For example, the way we have name Theodora, age 30, I can choose to come here and place this here. This one in Python means a new line character, and anytime you run it, what it does is that it creates a new line. So because of that, the age was moved to a new line. So wherever you print this, it will print a new line. All right, so when I remove it, we have a single line again. Now, the print function by default, if you type print and you say hello, and you type another print and you say world, and you run it, by default, each print statement is going to have a new line because by default, we have the end parameter holding a new line character. And this parameter is placed within every print function you call, whether you indicate the end or not. This is why anytime you use a print, whatever you output will be outputted on a new line. This world is not going to join the hello. The output is not going to join because the print function by default, based on its signature, has a new line character within it. Now, this is important because sometimes you are able to control that parameter, and instead of the new line character, you can change it. You can say nothing like this. This means nothing. And so when I run this, let me remove this one. Even though I have used two print functions, I have controlled the end parameter. And so the two will now be printed on one line because I have controlled the end parameter. I can tell the end parameter to have double new line characters or triple new line characters. And so when I run it, you can see that it is having just that. So this is important because whenever you are using the print function, in some programs, you are going to see end within the code, and you need to understand what it is doing there because the print function, by its design, has end within it that you can choose to call and control or not. If you don't call it, then the default value is what will be used. All right. Also, Python has a docstring within the print function, and this docstring is just comments. So whenever we create comments within a function, it is usually referred to as a docstring. So when you create a function, a function is created before it is used. For example, when I create my function like this, I can tell how this function was created and what it is used for by writing comments to explain my function. To write comment to explain my function, that comment is referred to as a docstring because it is a comment or it is comments for the function. And for any function like this function I have here, if I use the question mark, it is also going to display the signature of my function. The name of the function I created just now is called my second function, and it has these parameters within it. So in the interactive Python environment, you are able to see all of these things. And if you look at the docstring, you can see that it is not having any docstring because I didn't create a docstring for it. When we get to creating functions, we will look at how to create a docstring as well. All right. So talking about a print function, we have revealed that a print function has certain parameters in it that you can make use of. And sometimes when you are reading Python code, you are going to see these parameters and you need to know what they are. You are going to see them within your code. All right. The last thing we will talk about before we end today's lesson is how to print in different formats. When it comes to F strings, we've already looked at F strings, so we'll just talk about one of them and then we are done. All right, so what we are going to look at right now is referred to as the string.format method, string.format. So please, I want you to type str.format like this in the chat for me. String.format, just put that in the chat for me. str.format with a parenthesis, that's all. All right, thank you so much. Now, when you see string.format, it is a way to format your string for it to appear or for you to be able to print in a way that is quite easy for you. We've already looked at F strings and we've seen how easy it is to use F strings. And similar to F strings, we have another format of printing that is called string.format. And this string.format allows you to insert values into your strings, just like the F strings. This method provides an alternative way to format strings by replacing placeholders with the desired values, by replacing placeholders with the desired value. So over here, we can see an example here, and we have name, which is a variable, and it has a value Lucy. We have age, which has a value 25. When you want to use it, you can say print and put in your text or your string and create placeholders where you want to show your string or your values. And after your string, you need to type the format and provide those variables, and those values will be displayed. So let's test it here. Let's create a cell here. And let's say we have a variable name equals to Lucy, and we have age equals to 30. If you want to print with F strings, remember with F strings, you have to say F and string. Remember in Python, the quote means strings. So this means f strings. And we use f strings because we want to insert values within our text. So we can say hello, and we can just go ahead and say name. Congratulations. Congratulations. You are, and we can say age years old. That's all. When you run this, this is f strings, and it's going to intelligently insert your variables within your text or your string. So we have hello Lucy, congratulations, you are 30 years old. It makes sense because we've been able to insert the variables right within the string. The second format, which is string.format, goes like this. Sorry. You type your print, and then you go ahead and provide your string. After you provide your string, you go ahead and you say dot format. Okay, you go ahead and you say dot format, and you provide the names of the variables just like we saw over here. So once you say dot format, you go ahead and you provide the variables. So we have variable called name, and then we also have another variable called age. All right, so this is called string.format because you provide your string here, and then you say dot format. Now, over here, you can type your entire string, and you say hello, and wherever you want to insert a variable, you just put this over there. So hello, Lucy, congratulations. You are years old. All right, so this is how we use the string.format, and we create these placeholders, and we provide the names of the variables here. And so Python will look at the placeholders you have provided. If there are two, it will also check to see how many variables you have provided. If there are also two, then the first one will be placed in here. The second one will be placed in here. So if you run your program or your code, you are going to see, hello, Lucy, congratulations, you are 30 years old. This also works. Now, the string.format method was created to allow you to insert variables within your strings. And this was created first before the f strings were created. And so previously, this was how we used to insert values within our text or our strings. But now we use the f string because the f string is more modern and it's easier and less confusing to use. For example, over here, if you forget to provide the same number of variables here, what will happen is that you are going to get an error. So here, if you provide, let's say 2, and here you have only 1, you are going to get an error because you were asking for 2. You used 2 placeholders, but you provided only 1. So you need to provide the exact number of placeholders to make it work. All right. All right. So what we have covered today is we've looked at the interactive Python environment. We've looked at the IDLE. We've looked at Jupyter Lab, and we have looked at comments, how to put comments in your program. And then we've also looked at the print function and its parameters, the sep and the end parameters. And we've also looked at how to print in f strings and in what we call string.format. So these are all various ways you can write your code in Python and get it to work. Sometimes when you are reading Python code, you are going to see these things, and as a Python developer, you are supposed to understand what they mean. So if you see this, it simply means we are using string to format or string.format. And it's very, very simple. We have your string here in quotes and then dot format holding your variables. And that is why we call it string.format. And then this is f string because we have f and then we have our strings in quotes. The f string is one more than the print string.format. And so you should be using the f string more. And you are going to see the f strings more often than the string.format. Later on, we are going to learn how to create functions, and we will see how we can define our own Python functions and how they truly work. We can also create docstrings within our function to provide comments within our function to explain what the function does. All right. So this is where we end today's session. And everything we've talked about, they are foundational knowledge that will help you to build upon and to be able to do advanced work using Python. In your cells here, you can make text bold if you select Markdown and you wrap it around these double quotes, sorry, double asterisks. You can also use the hash here and just provide a space to create a heading 1. So if you want to create a stronger heading 1, you can just use hash and just add a space. If you don't add a space, it's not going to show. If you want to create heading 2, a smaller heading, you can use 2 of the hash and it will create a smaller heading. You can also create 3 to create heading 3. And when it comes to headings, we have different levels of heading. You can use 4 to create heading 4 and so on. So depending on how bold or how large you want it, you can also use any number of hash symbols to make that work. All right, so this is where we bring today's lesson to an end. Tomorrow we'll have another lesson that will wrap up the module 1 of our training program, and we will have an examination on the module 1. So everything we have covered will be within the module 1. And to end the class, I'm going to show you one particular work that you are supposed to work on as a group, not now, but you will submit it tomorrow. You work on it as a group, and tomorrow you actually present it in class. So let me just show you, and tomorrow we will ask you to present it, and we will look at it before class begins. So let me share with you, and this is it. So this is a simple string manipulation, and you are supposed to follow these subtopics and write your Python code to do what this is asking, and you will solve it under each of these subtopics like this. So under concatenation, you ask the user to enter their first name and last name. You can combine them into a full name and display it. So this is very, very simple. Everyone here should be able to do this. So these are simple tasks that will help you understand the concepts that we have covered so far. And later you'll be able to combine all of them to create more intelligent programs. All right, so I'm going to share this with you. Let me see if I can just put it in the chat. And if I can, you can just share it within your WhatsApp groups, or I will share with your group leaders, and your group leaders will be able to share with you as well. So let me see if I can just put it in the chat. So I'm trying to load it right now. So you can share it in your respective groups and work with it. All right, so I think the chat is not allowing file attachment. Sometimes it does that. So I'm going to share it with you. I'm going to share it with the group leaders, and the group leaders will post it in your group. All right, so this is where Okay, so someone doesn't have a group. Paul doesn't have a group. Okay, so Paul, please join group two. So group two, you join group two. So the group two leader, please contact Paul and get him to join group two. All right. So tomorrow we will talk about another important concept in Python, and we'll wrap up the module one of this training. After tomorrow, we will have a break for the Christmas. And if you have any lesson to catch up on, you have access to the LMS to go over all that we've done, and you'll catch up. Then when we resume, we will also have the module two to complete all the concepts we need to be proficient with Python. All right. So thank you all very much. We'll end here. Tomorrow, I'm going to give a lot of time for you to ask more questions. If you have any question, you can ask and we can go over all of that. If you have any issues with your LMS, please send an email to support@reachafrica.com and you'll get access to your LMS. So thank you all. We will end here and I'll see you tomorrow. I wish you all the best. Have a good night and bye-bye.